Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for ranked play in patch 10.13. The meta is still evolving, but there's definitely a few champions settled in nice and snug at the top of the meta. But keep in mind that this list is not in order of strength, as each champion is viable depending on the right situation. With that said, let's get into the video. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Let's get back to the video, and to start off the top 10, we've got Ezreal coming in at number 10. Ezreal is continuing to leave his mark in the meta due to his ultimate in 10.13. On top of his ability being fantastic by doing essentially an AoE version of Mana Reaver, he also has two useful traits. Chrono, as mentioned earlier, is one of the best splash traits in the game. Blaster is way less impactful than Chrono, but you do need to take into account the fact that Ezreal is going to be paired with Jinx most of the time. So he enables Jinx with Blaster, and you're almost always going to have Chrono when you're running him. As far as the utility champions, he's got to be near the top, partially because of his ultimate, but also he can make Jinx an even better carry. One last thing to mention is he doesn't actually need items to do well, but giving him either a Shojin or blue buff will increase his effectiveness by a huge amount. Another returning champion this week is Wukong, and he's taking the number 9 spot on the list. Wukong remains a staple champion in the meta, especially with nerfs to Nautilus. It's really cemented Wukong as the top dog for Vanguards given the amount of CC he provides while having a great secondary trait, Chrono. He's played in so many different builds as a part of the front line, as he is easily one of the best filler champions available. He may not be the star of the show, but he's definitely the foundation on which the build sits upon. Victor makes it into this week's list as the number 8 champion, but it was a close race between him and Riven for the top 10. Don't worry though, we'll be talking about her later in the video. That said, both champions are essential parts of the Riven sort composition, and Riven is used in other similar builds, but Victor took the prize because he's often the main carry for sorcerers. Riven is also a lot more item dependent, whereas Victor can be a bit more flexible. Tier items are definitely a necessity for him, but you can go one of 3 routes: blue buff, Shojin, or the Star Guardian spatula item. All 3 can be used on Victor or mixed and matched depending on the components that you have. A damage item is always welcome, but again, AP items can be okay, like Morellonomicon, Deathcap, or even Jeweled Gauntlet. Outside of sorcerers, there is the potential to run Victor in a battlecast focused build, but you're going to primarily see him in a 6 sorcerer based composition. Moving along, let's talk about the number 7 champion on the list, Gnar. Good old Gnar is back again as a top meta champion because his ability, despite a small nerf to the stun duration, is still extremely good. The amount of CC he can dish out by displacing the enemy team as well as a stun is, well, amazing. And he's hard to kill with not only being a brawler, but also receiving health when he transforms. Unfortunately, Astro hasn't been doing well in 10.13 because the main build you would play it in, Astro Sniper, isn't consistent enough to be a top comp. But luckily for Gnar, he's amazing on his own and fits in a multitude of brawler-based frontline builds that are currently playable. So even if you're not playing him for Astro, you can still have him in your frontline. Up next, we've got Vayne as the number 6 champion this week. Vayne is absolutely bonkers as a 3-cost carry in the current meta. She rivals even Jinx as one of the best backline carries because of a few reasons. Obviously, number 1 is her trait, Cybernetic. Getting bonus health and attack damage makes her even more of a threat as well as harder to kill. On top of that, another reason is the tumble aspect of her ultimate. When used, she becomes untargetable momentarily, meaning champions attacking her will drop aggro and certain spells will even fizzle out against her. That increases her survivability by a ton. Lastly, she just does a lot of damage between Cybernetics, Sniper, and the bonus damage of her ability and items that you give her. Those items will be AD focused, with Last Whisper and Infinity Edge being the standard combination, though Deathblade is not a bad choice either. Combine both her survivability and damage and you've got a great carry, even though she's only a 3-cost. Next up, let's talk about another carry in Cybernetics, coming in at number 5 on the list, Echo. Echo is scary after the changes to him in the mid-season update. He's an example of the design philosophy that they went with the update, as they wanted legendary champions to be playable despite their traits. And Echo really takes that design to heart, as he's broken free of the need to be tied to just cybernetics. Now you can play him in a lot of different builds as the 8th or 9th champion. Pair him with an infiltrator like, say, Fizz, and boom, you're good to go. Of course, cybernetics are also doing really well in the meta, which makes his value even higher. A piece of advice when playing against Echo, which is likely most games, is that you want to avoid having Quicksilver on your carry. If they do have one, he will often focus them down during his ultimate, as their attack speed won't be slowed. The number 4 champion on our list is Thresh. Thresh did get slapped with the nerf bat in 10-13, but he's still one of the best solo champions you can toss into your comp at level 9. He enables so many champions by pulling them in and giving them mana that it's hard not to value him so highly as a champion. In particular, the best champion you can pull in is Urgot. Urgot is good on his own and is part of the meta, but he gets a lot more attention because of his interaction with Thresh, specifically with Thresh 2. When pulled in, he can cast almost immediately, so as long as you position Thresh properly, you can manipulate the available targets for Urgot to grab. This interaction makes these two champions pair extremely well together. Besides Urgot, there's many other champions you can have on your bench to pull in, such as Lulu, Janna, Fizz, Gnar, Wukong, or even Blitzcrank. On top of that, Thresh has great traits. Chrono is one of the best splash traits in the game, and while Mana Reaver has become a much more limited trait with the removal of Kassadin, it's still great in cybernetics. Basically, Thresh has so many solid aspects about him, it's always worth it to play him at level 8 or 9. We're into our top 3, and taking the number 3 spot on the list is Fizz. Fizz has finally done it with the mid-season update. He's become a real champion. It's been a long time coming for Fizz to be playable outside of mech, and in 10-12 and 10-13, he's been showing his true power. Honestly, almost any current build that can find a way to fit Fizz in should. He's that useful. A displacement ability that stuns and does a huge chunk of damage, generally on the backline, which is often where the enemy carry is, yes please. Besides being playable on his own or with another infiltrator in a lot of builds, mech is also still doing well enough in the current meta. That makes Fizz even more valuable and quite contested right now. You may even find it difficult to get Fizz 2-starred or to find him at all based on how popular he is. Next up, Jinx is coming in at number 2. Jinx continues to thrive after being nerfed as one of the best, if not the best, 4-cost carry. She's played in several meta compositions such as 6 Rebels, 4 Brawlers, or even in mech. The flexibility in playable builds makes her highly valued, but on top of that, she can use a decent variety of items as well. The top 2 default items you can put on her are Last Whisper and Infinity Edge as the standard AD item pair, but you can also give her a Deathblade, Runaan's, Red Buff, or Giant Slayer. The bottom line about Jinx is that she can put out a lot of damage, is relatively safe in the build she plays, and doesn't need super specific items to carry. We've got one last champion to talk about, and that's Auriel Sol, who's finally made it to the top of the meta as our number 1 champion on today's list. Auriel Sol is absolutely ridiculous right now. The buffs he received in the mid-season update were enough to finally make him a huge threat in the meta. One of the main reasons is that his fighters now drain mana, and mana drain has been historically super strong in TFT. Aurelion tends to be thrown into build using Rebel, but he can also be played in a multitude of other compositions. This flexibility is increased further if you manage to procure either a spatula or a specific spatula item, as you can turn him into either a protector or a battle cast for more value. Besides those items, he does well with Morellonomicon, Warmogs, or even a Luden's Echo, which is notoriously not a great late game item, but is surprisingly decent on Aurelion. Overall, this starship is at the top of the list in contested champions for 10-13. Alright folks, that is the top 10 champions for ranked in patch 10-13. But before we go home today, we've got a few more champions to talk about as our honorable mentions. We talked briefly about this champion earlier, so our first honorable mention is Riven. Victor did end up claiming the spot in the top 10, but Riven easily slides in as an honorable mention because she's just so darn good in the composition she's a part of. Primarily, you'll see her in a 6 Sorcerer build as the main frontline champ. She can be tossed in other compositions, whether it be Sorcerer variations or even just Blademaster Chrono unit in Cybernetics. That said, Riven does feel most at home when played with a few sorcerers, as the bonus AP helps boost her damage and shielding. Where Riven falters is mostly in items, as to make her as effective as possible, you'll need a few specific ones. Guardian Angel is up there in importance, as you'll want Riven to stay alive as long as possible throughout the fight. Quicksilver is another must-have so that she doesn't get immediately crowd controlled during the early parts of the fight. Lastly, you'll want some type of rod item, preferably a death cap, as it boosts her AP by a lot. If you're unable to get this item, that's okay, as Ionic Spark is a good choice as well. In fact, if you're able to get an early Ionic Spark, you're better off doing that instead of waiting to make the death cap. All in all, Riven is an important unit in several meta compositions, so just make sure you're focusing items on her. The second honorable mention this week is Ahri. It may have been noticeable that the top 10 list this week was missing any 1 or 2 cost champions. The reason for that is that everyone is playing extremely aggressive with their leveling, which lowers the value of 1 cost champions. When you can roll into 2, 3, or even 4 cost champions more often early on in the game, you really don't seek out those 1 cost champions to stabilize the early game. That's where Ahri comes in as one of the early to mid game 2 cost carries that's doing very well in the meta right now. There are a few other options like Lucian or Kog'Maw, but Ahri is generally going to carry you longer in the game than the other low cost champions. She can be played to hold on to items and sold later. They can really be any items though, being a sorcerer, she preferably wants magic based items. She works best when you transition her into another AP carry such as Victor, Cassiopeia, or even an early Aurelion Sol. Outside of being a carry, she is a stand-in sorcerer for builds that use the trait as well as 3-star Guardian, but she shines brightest early on in the game as a 2-cost carry. Alright, that's all we have for you today, folks. The meta has settled down a bit after the shakeup of the mid-season update, but everything's still in a state of flux. What's good today may change tomorrow. Let us know in the comment section below which of the top 10 champions are your favorites. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.